Welcome in. It is a Clippers Talk Live. The morning after the Clippers' big 10-point victory over the Golden State Warriors last night at Intuit Dome. And the morning after, we got the news that Kawhi Leonard's return date is January 4th against the Atlanta Hawks. Back at the Dome after this 3-game road trip. That is the target date. I'm Adam Oslin. We got BJ Matthews from the Pull Up Podcast joining us here once again. BJ, where can everybody find you?
Thank you, Adam. It's always a pleasure being on, my man. So you can find us on YouTube, the Pull Up Basketball Podcast, as well as Twitter at the Pull Up Shows, ThePullupShows. That's the Pull Up Shows, and Instagram Pull Up Basketball Podcast as well.
Let's start with this because I think I was more harsh than Coach Lou was post-game, talking about what occurred in the fourth quarter, where they had 12 turnovers and almost gave the game away. It would have been a monumental collapse. It was a complete meltdown. I thought there were some real warning signs with them not being able to get the ball into the front court with that backcourt press from the Golden State Warriors. What did you see, and how concerning did you make, or did you consider that fourth quarter to be?
Surprisingly, I felt because we beat Golden State. This is the third time we beat them. So, as concerning we almost lost, the way we almost lost, I was not really shocked because Golden State, I think, really is a team that really wants to beat us. So I think they're going off of adrenaline. Podzinski and James Harden get into a little bit. I think that fed off the Warriors as well. Concerning as far as the turnovers, though, I did not like how we got the ball into. We were making sloppy passes. They were pressuring, Harden and Chris Dunn full court, which tells us that we're kind of lacking that department as well. So I was concerned as far as that, but not really surprised.
Do you think, because I've been talking about this specifically over the last week now, that to me, the hole on this Clippers team is not having a more seasoned backup secondary ball handler. And last night kind of emphasized that or reinforced that in my mind. Is that the biggest flaw on this team right now? A lot of people are pointing to they need another backup center. They need a power forward. To me, it's having a true backup playmaker that is reliable out there. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think so because there's one or two things that we can do. I mean, Harden, of course, is our main playmaker, so he can either be the solo playmaker and we have other guys around him who can handle the rock, or we're just going to go pretty much all defense, especially in that backcourt, and other people have to take turns. The Chris Dunns, the Mir Coffees, the Terrence Manns when he gets back. Players like that at that position, they're going to have to share the responsibility to bring the ball up. But yeah, we definitely don't have a quote unquote playmaker outside of Harden. KPJ, he's good, in transition. He's good, in spurts, but he's not a seasoned point guard.
I almost feel like last night may have soured me on the idea because it's not just last night, but I saw more of the same issues with Chris Dunn bringing the ball into the front court, where he had multiple turnovers like he did against Minnesota, where he had that bad turnover late where Anthony Edwards just took it the other way for the dunk in that first game in Minnesota. I don't know if Chris Dunn is good enough with the ball in his hands to fill that void in a playoff setting. I don't know if Terrence Mann is either. If you're getting pressured, if the ball pressure and the physicality is the way it was last night, yeah, that is very eye-opening to me.
Yeah, it is. And it's just, one of those things where, you might have to, crack a few eggs, make an omelet. Like, we don't have a quote unquote playmaker. And this is kind of something we've been dealing with over the last few years. Like, we've had to use other, bigger guys, bigger guards, bigger wings who are not primary point guards to run that position. And it could be a little bit of an issue, but I think we're going to have to do it by committee. And I even saw Norman Powell trying to bring the ball up as well and to dribble through traps. And that's not his game at all.
You talked with Coach Lou post-game. After the win last night, 102-92 was the final. And Ivica Zubac had 17 and 11 in that game. And you kind of talked with Coach Lou about his progression as a player. If this is him really making strides, or is it about the opportunity? Just talk a little bit and summarize what Coach Lou said about Ivica Zubac to you post-game.
1 second.
Oh, no worries. Big Zoo ended up with 5 blocks in the game, by the way, and a huge one on Moody late. So he was doing it on both ends. I still felt like he could have been featured more. But give us the inside scoop on what you talked about with Coach Lou regarding Big Zoo.
Well, Zoo is quietly been our probably our most important piece, most consistent player. 15 and 12 this season, but I'm looking at the field goal percentage. Adam, he's shooting about 62% from the field, so he's third in the league in rebounds, and he's top in the league in the field goal percentage as well. And we've spoke about this before too. He doesn't get the ball enough, in our personal opinion. When they do give him the ball, good things happen. So Coach Lou, I asked him, hey, is this just something that you see different in Zubac, or is this something that people are just starting to notice? And he went on with saying, this is how, he's been. It's just, now that he's getting better and better every single year, people are really starting to take heed to it. However, I don't really see them really featuring Zubac the way they should be featuring, regardless even what Coach Lou's answer was. I think they are still too guard oriented. They're not feeding their big man enough. They're not playing as smart as they could be.
Yeah, and he kind of mentioned post game last night that he could have been one of the easy answers when they couldn't find a bucket late in the fourth quarter, when they were struggling so much to get some easy points. And he said, we got to get better with that. So Ivica
Right.
Zubac, that's just somebody that can be kind of a release valve out there, or a safety valve, or a security blanket. When you're not able to score, dump it into Big Zoo and let him go to work, because when he's going one-on-one with guys right now, if they're not doubling him, Ivica Zubac is detonating. He is destroying guys. I mean, the first play of the game was him dunking on Trace Jackson Davis. Like, he has been that good. He's in a real groove right now.
Yeah, he is. And I saw the trap that Ty Lue was talking about. They doubled him with, I think, Trey Jackson Davis and Dennis Schroeder coming off the high side. So teams are taking notice. Like, again, Zubac is not the most sexiest scorer, and he's not the most featured guy in this offense we've been, having in the last few years. But the Western Conference is slowly starting to see just how dominant he is. Like, you can make a case he's a top 5 center this season off of just his dominance inside with scoring, rebounding, and field goal percentage. We can make that case.
The blocks he had last night too, like, he was just dominant. He was a force. He has been playing like a man possessed out there, going back to the game against the Memphis Grizzlies, where I don't think many people coming into that game were going to say, oh, yeah, Ivica Zubac is not only going to dominate Zach Edey, but also Triple J in this ball game, dunk on him multiple times. Edey had, one make, and it was a three-pointer. I think it was 1 for 8. Like, Ivica Zubac made both of those guys look small. He's really playing to his size right now. I know he's 27, and I'm not surprised by this, because I feel like it's mostly just getting the opportunity and getting more consistent reps out there of being featured more. But it also feels like, I don't know, he is understanding and playing to his size and knowing how big he is out there on a level we haven't seen in prior years, or at least as consistently as this.
Yeah. It just comes down to opportunity and anything, man. Like, look at, the team, like Norman Powell, look what he's doing. Like, he's averaging 24 off of 50% shooting, man. This is just an opportunity to do what he's able to do, addition by subtraction, like he said, like, and that's just how he is. And really not just basketball, but life in general. If you are qualified, you put in the work and you're confident in yourself, you'd be amazed what the sky would be and the limit would be.
And as people are pointing out in the chat, the one flaw with Ivica Zubac so far this season is his free throw shooting. He's better than this. He's typically a 70% free throw shooter. He's just over 53% right now. But I think that's a little bit nitpicking, but it is also something that he has to be better at, of course, especially if you want the ball late in games. Let's talk about somebody who's going to change the complexion and the dynamic of this team, especially when it comes down to crunch time, because he's their go-to guy, Kawhi Leonard. He has a target return date, according to La Murray of The Athletic. Came on with me pregame, had the post about an hour before the game started, saying, according to him in The Athletic, January 4th is the date they're circling. That's their next game at Intuit Dome. They're taking on the Atlanta Hawks, as Kawhi Leonard's staying back on this 3-game road trip because they're playing 3 and 4 days. They don't really have time to practice. So this gives Kawhi time to practice still with the G League team. But how encouraged are you by that news? And What do you think Kawhi's going to look like initially when he returns, BJ?
Well, first off, I'm happy to see him on the court, man. Like that's the first and foremost. Just thank God we get a chance to see this man on the basketball court. Of course they're going to limit his minutes, and we talked about this last night, Adam. Like we have to look at not just the games he's playing, but the minutes he's playing. And with that being said, like how he's gonna look when he comes back, I think he's gonna look, I think he's gonna be a little rusty, of course, but I think his poise and his energy, I think he'll be a little bit more sharper than, the previous returns because it is January. He's coming back getting more rested a little bit before halfway throughout the season. So, he'll rusty, probably not shoot the ball quite much. He's going to probably focus more on the defensive end, in my personal opinion, and if anything.
James Harden last night post game said he and Kawhi Leonard were talking on the bench, and Kawhi was expressing the fact that he didn't want to come back and disrupt the flow
Yep.
or come back and be too demanding with the basketball
Right.
because they got something good going on right
Right.
now. We know he's an unselfish player. This is somebody that plays team basketball first before he
Right.
looks to get his. I
Right.
feel like that's a pretty huge advantage in just integrating him and having it be more of a seamless transition.
Yeah, and see that's why I've said I think he's gonna focus more on the defensive end, let Norm and Zubac still do their thing, and play through the team. Because you recall last year in the playoffs when he came back in that game too, and I think they were trying to force feed him the basketball, and I think he shot 14 shots that game, and it was just like you guys won game one without Kawhi. I don't think he wants y'all to force feed him, but I think they want him to still be themselves, and I'll come along as I get in there. Like as the season goes on, I'll find my way, but right now it's all about winning games. So I think he's going to focus more on the defensive end.
My one concern is that, of course, my biggest concern is that the knee swells back up once he gets back to NBA action because you can't really replicate that with even 5-on-5 scrimmages
Right.
against his
Right.
teammates. It's just not the same.
Right.
But when he came back from the ACL in fall of 2022, the
Hmm.
first 8 games, I went through them the other day. He was getting about 12 points per game, taking 11 shots. He was shooting 40% from the field. He was at like 15% from the outside. It really took him some time to find his rhythm. When he did, it took off, and he looked like Kawhi again that season and was putting up crazy efficiency numbers just like he was last year. But I wonder how long he's going to go through this feeling out process because this is not an ACL this time he's coming back from. There was no structural damage. It's swelling in
Right.
the right knee. Do you think it's going to be as lengthy of a process of him getting up to speed and getting back to looking like Kawhi Leonard, or because it's not as severe of a knee injury that he could get back to looking like himself sooner than later?
Yeah. Excuse me. I think with no structural damage is a good sign. I think it's all it's a mental thing, man. So yes, it was, fluid in the knee. Yes, it's like another setback, he experienced, but it's no structural damage. I think he'll be a little bit more, I want to say assertive coming off of this injury. And I think, like I said, you just try different methods. Like, first two times you came back, it was, you have to be reevaluated again. Now the third time you might try something different. So I think he'll be a little more assertive. I think he'll be a little bit more comfortable knowing there's no structural damage. So it won't take him as long as my personal opinion.
Yeah, we know, of course, they're going to handle it with kid gloves. They're going to be overly cautious as they should be. It's Kawhi Leonard, and they're playing a very good basketball right now. They're 18 and 13, 31 games in without Kawhi. They're fifth in the West. They're 2 games back of the Dallas Mavericks, who are fourth in the West, and they have a major injury going on with Luka Doncic, who could be out for the next month or so. So they have a little bit of wiggle room and room for error going on right now. They don't have to force things. They don't have to push things with Kawhi Leonard. I don't think they would, regardless of the record, just given his injury history. But this team is in such a good place right now, BJ. Like, they've exceeded my expectations and then some. Like the way they've been able to play, and I know you've talked about it a lot, it's the defense. It's the defense what they've been able to do so far this season is Jeff Van Gundy, is them committing to playing great defense, which is not easy to me when you struggle on offense as much as they have in spurts like this Clippers team, yet they still stay committed to playing great defense on the other end. That is what has been special to me about this team. Like, if your offense isn't there, sometimes it causes slippage on the other end. They have been locked down on the defensive end pretty much all season long.
Yeah, man. Good. Big respect to Jeff Van Gundy for that, man. And he's he's generally like in the past in his Knicks days, he had like top 5 defenses, and these guys have bought in the Chris Dunns, the Derrick Jones Juniors, even the Ivica Zubac, Norman Powell's bought in. Like James Harden, I liked how he played last night. Like he had a block on the corner. I don't know who he blocked. He hustled on the other side and actually got a key block. So I like how he played in that first half especially. So it's just about a team camaraderie and sacrificing. Like everybody has to pitch in, everybody's going to have to do what they need to do to buy in, but it's definitely been the defense.
How much better do you think they can be on that end with Kawhi Leonard back? Do you think there will be a learning curve because it is a new defensive system? He's been around them. He's trying to pick up on the X's and O's of what's been happening there. But at their ceiling, at their best, with Kawhi in the fold, and Law Murray expects Chris Dunn to be the guy who's out of the starting lineup. So it would be James Harden, Norman Powell, Kawhi, Derrick Jones Jr., and Ivica Zubac in the starting lineup when he comes back. How good can that unit be with Kawhi? How much can he raise their ceiling on that end? Could we be looking at the greatest defensive squad ever by the Los Angeles Clippers?
Yeah, man. Because this thing, it's the scary part is you've been a top 5 defense with the best defensive player on the squad. So Kawhi, like on the offensive end, he doesn't want to disrupt the flow. He's going to do everything he can to, catch up on the defensive scheme. And I think he's going to be more of him adjusting to the team rather than the team adjusting to him.
That makes sense. I like that. I think when he's been in situations where there is more of a ready-made system, like with the Toronto Raptors, like with the San Antonio Spurs, a
Mm-hmm.
team that knows how to play with him, that knows how to play without him and get by, and he can kind of blend in instead of being just a piece that is almost disruptive in a way because he's such a big piece and so important to this team that you have to change your style of play. That's when there can be issues out there, I think. But I just feel like because of how they're basically a bottom 10 offense on the season, he's not going to hurt them there. He should be able to help them
Right.
immediately. And then on the defensive end, I got to feel like Kawhi's licking his chops, looking at the way they play defense. Like he wants to be a part of this because he loves to play defense. And there aren't many guys like that.
Yeah. He came into the league as a defensive specialist, man. Like that's what he came in. He didn't come on as this star player, this star offensive talent. Like he came in defense first, hard worker. Is going to give it all every single night. He became and developed through his, perseverance, a better offensive efficient player. But he's going right back to what his roots is: defense. I'm locking up the best guy. I want to play the best player every single night. Of course, that's going to take some time. But yeah, he don't have no problem giving up shots. That's what I genuinely believe.
BJ from the Pull Up Podcast is our guest here the morning after the Clippers' 10-point victory over the Golden State Warriors. And we found out Kawhi has a target date of returning on January 4th back into a dome against the Atlanta Hawks. If you guys got questions, I know somebody in here is asking about T-Man's evaluation. And I did see this from Law Murray of The Athletic. But Terrence Mann, I believe, has been doing some individual stuff. He's got the broken left middle finger going on. And Law Murray did say, I expect Terrence to travel with the team. He's been traveling. Don't think he is likely to play until after the trip since he still isn't practicing in full so far. So that's your update on Terrence Mann. But look, I'm not trying to get Terrence Mann on the trading block or anything like that. But we've been talking about Colin Sexton here over the last week and that report that came out from Clutch Points that there was some interest by the Clippers. Is that a player that you'd like to see on this team that can cure what ails them when it comes to a backup ball handler and somebody able to initiate some offense, but also play with speed and kind of give them a change up in that area with his quickness? Or do you think he has some liability issues because he's an undersized guard at just 6'3"? How do you feel about Colin Sexton, BJ?
I think for this particular team, I think he would be good because I mean, like we're comparing him to KPJ. Like I think Colin's more of a defensive player than KPJ. Even though KPJ's been good, I think Colin Sexton is more of a better defensive player. I think he's even a more high IQ player than KPJ, and that's all it's really been with KPJ to me. It's like he's really good at moments, and then at times he's just like, what's going on? Like he hasn't played for a winning franchise, so you kind of put him in a position where he ain't really been in. So if they bring in Colin Sexton, who I think is a little bit more season a little bit better. I feel like with a team like this, I think he'll be more defensive oriented. I think he'll be smarter with the basketball. I think that'll be an upgrade from KPJ.
Yeah, like I have seen progress with KPJ. I just don't know if it's going to be enough by the end of this season to be able to trust him in a 7-game series because he does make some head scratching mistakes. And I don't want to say he's definitively a low IQ basketball player, but we haven't seen him in winning situations. Like this is the first time with this Clippers team. It's
Right.
just different. So he has a lot of deprogramming, I think, to do from the way he played in Houston, from the way he played with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Those were bad situations outside of him. I'm not putting it all on him, especially in Houston. It was very dysfunctional. But it's about making winning basketball plays. It's about taking high percentage shots, and I haven't seen enough of that from KPJ so far. Quickly, your
Yeah,
thoughts on him and his growth this season. Is it enough to make you feel like there is something there where you got, 50 more games left in the season for him to kind of figure it out?
I just think in the playoffs is not gonna. I don't think he's a playoff raiser. I gave him like about a month and some change to see what he got, and I already know what his game is. It's gonna be good and transition speed. He has been given effort on the defensive end. He is talented, but in the playoffs, you already know Adam it becomes a half court game. You gotta be able to knock down shots, and we're gonna be playing through the Kawhi Leonard offense, meaning where he's gonna stop the ball. He's gonna look for guys to be able to hit open shots, and I think if you can't really do that in a high pressure situation, you're going to be kind of benched. I think Colin Sexton will be better off in that role.
Yeah, KPJ is he's too much of a wild card to me. I don't know what you're getting each and every game, each and every quarter, possession to possession. I think he's improved. I just don't know if it's enough to convince me that he should have that backup point guard spot locked up with this Clippers team. And you shouldn't look at somebody like Colin Sexton if there's an opportunity to get him. Lloyd Tackwell in here put out a super chat. Appreciate you, Lloyd. He said, "Did you hear
Salute.
Coach Malone torch the Kings? We need a lot more of that in the NBA and in life. Good job inviting BJ and Dime Dropper onto your show." Of course. Your overall thoughts on Mike Brown, because from my perspective, I'm a NorCal guy. The Kings were my team in my youth, and I think Mike Brown is a solid NBA coach. However, when things go badly, it's a lot easier to just get rid of one person in the head coach than turn over the entire roster. So I was not surprised over him being let go. Did you view it as unfair? How did you see the firing of Mike Brown last night for the Sacramento Kings, obviously in the pack dib with the Clippers?
Yeah, man. It's gonna go to the coach. When things go well, it goes to the players. When things go bad, it goes on the coach, and that's the nature of the business. I mean, we heard Coach Kerr talk about it. We heard Mike Malone. We heard Rick Carlisle. A few coaches came out and spoke about Mike Brown. So you're talking about a guy who was a coach of the year just 2 seasons ago, turned around a team that did not make the playoffs, and you know this, Adam, for I think over 20 years since like the Mike Bibby, Doug
Yeah.
Christie, Vlade Divac, all those days, like
It was
the
since
most.
2006. It was the longest drought in the three big professional sports: football, Major League Baseball, and the National Basketball Association.
Yeah, so he did that in what his first season as the Kings coach. So you have to appreciate him for that. But my thing is, it's not even the firing that bothered me. It's like Mike Malone telling the story of how he got fired. He's on his way to the airport. He's in the car. They give him a phone call and they relieve him of his, situation. So they didn't even have the decency to, invite him back to, Sacramento, have a sit down, speak to him face to face and tell him what was going on and the direction they were going. I would have felt better about the firing off of that, even though I don't feel like he should have been fired at all. But if you're going to do something like that, at least actually do it face to face. So that tells me that there's some foul play going on. I think some of the players or one of the players did not want Mike Malone or Mike Brown the team no more. And I think De'Aaron Fox not having that resigning yet, this was a desperate move.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It was more about how they let him go. He had just spoke at practice 15 minutes beforehand. They let him go through that whole presser, and then they fire him right afterwards. It feels impulsive and a little bit unprofessional, and it doesn't feel like they have a lot of stability right there with the Sacramento Kings or at the moment because of this. So I can understand from that perspective. I was just saying, yeah, I'm not surprised, but the way it was handled was pretty poor. So that's something that I think needs to be corrected, and it shows the Sacramento Kings and their ownership in a bad light there. But let's move back to the Clippers here as we close things out. Some people are saying Colin Sexton's not a great defender. He wouldn't be an upgrade over KPJ in that area. Rock here is saying if you're going after Sexton, it's solely as a scoring threat and added ball handling. But those are big needs on this Clippers team. Like it's
Right.
not to undervalue those two things because that's kind of exactly what they need. I don't know if Colin Sexton's the perfect guy because he is a little bit smaller. People are saying he was measured at the combine at 6'1" and a half with shoes on. He's listed, I think, as 6'3". You don't want to bring in somebody that's a liability on the defensive end and that hurts you there. But we're talking about somebody in the second unit. So you can get away with, if he's next to Chris Dunn, if he's next to other good defenders, Batum, Amir Coffey, then I think it's not as much of a limitation, whatever his defensive acumen is.
Yeah. So you're saying about KPJ and what his position, what the team is, or what was it?
I
What was your top
I
point?
I guess I'm comparing him to Colin Sexton and saying, Colin Sexton might have limitations on the defensive end, but you're talking about a backup, a guy in the second unit. Teams aren't going to be able to expose that as much. It doesn't worry me as much the fact that he's an undersized guard.
Yeah, it doesn't either. I mean, what KPJ is what 6'3", 6'4". They got Colin Six, I think 6'1", 6'2". So it's only a 2 inch difference. And like I said, like we talked about, man, KPJ hasn't really been on a winning team. So when you've been on a team that's basically have no expectations and you move them to a team that has some, that's a huge jump. That's a huge adjustment. Like that is kind of why he plays how he plays. He's the playground style playing and the multiple turnovers, the multiple missed mistakes. But you'll see some good things about him. And I just don't trust that in the postseason where the stakes are raised so much higher against more better coach teams that can adjust to all that. I don't feel like KPJ is ready for that type of basketball. So I do think Colin Sexton, I'm not really concerned about that either.
Yeah, even if I concede that maybe he's a worse defender than KPJ, the scoring thing, Rock, is kind of a big deal. And he also gives you a real change of pace. And as we saw last night with not having enough ball handlers being able to bring up the basketball, and some of that will be aided by Kawhi Leonard coming back, of course. But I still feel like this is the biggest hole on the team right now, having a guy or not having a player that can just really take control and alleviate some of that playmaking and offensive initiating burden off of James Harden. But lastly, here, BJ, I want to ask you, what do you think the Clippers go record wise on this 3-game road trip? They got a back to back starting in New Orleans, then San Antonio, then a day off. And then on January 2nd, they're taking on the OKC Thunder. What's the record?
Either 1-2 or 2-1. I think that Spurs game is gonna be tricky. I think they beat the Pelicans. I think they lose to the Thunder, and I think that Spurs game. I've been watching the Spurs. That's a wild card. I don't know because they're a playing team right now, and with no Kawhi, I don't think that's going to be just a scratch off game because we always beat the Spurs for the most part, but the stakes are a little bit different. So I hate to say it, I'm gonna go 1-2.
Yeah, that Spurs game is the kind of the swing game there. You expect to beat the Pelicans. You don't expect to be able to beat OKC, although you never know. They weren't expected to beat the Memphis Grizzlies last Monday, and they figured out a way. But that Spurs team with Wemby starting to make that leap over the last month or so and playing much better after a slow start in his sophomore season, that's going to be a really tough game and probably decide whether they have a winning record on these 3 games on this road trip or a losing record. He is BJ Matthews of the Pull Up Podcast. BJ, one more time, tell the people where they can find you on each and every platform.
You can find me on YouTube, the Pull Up Basketball Podcast, Instagram at pull-up_podcast, and on X Twitter, the Pull Up Shows. You can find me on all different platforms. And you can also find me on Clippers Talk with Adam from time to time. Great platform, man. Great discussion. Wish I can be here a little bit longer, but I gotta get to my show. Always a pleasure, my man. I'll see you next time.
Appreciate you. I'm going to stay on a little bit longer here. But get out of here. Handle your business on a Saturday. Love you, BJ. It was good hanging yesterday at the pregame presser as well. We'll talk soon.
My guy, appreciate you.
Clipper Nation, you can keep the questions coming in here. I'll hang out for a little bit longer. What else am I doing? I'm just chilling in my car right now. Rock is bringing up, I think, some fair points, talking about Colin Sexton. He said, however, being a smaller guard with defensive issues, how can you combine that type of player with Norm and Harden minutes? And if you can't, is that worth $18 million off the bench? It really depends on how much of a liability he is on the defensive end. Because everything that I've seen, and I've talked to other people who know Colin Sexton very well, my friend Bob Smith at Fear the Fro podcast, he's been covering the Cavaliers his entire life, so he's familiar with him. He says he's a try-hard guy. Is that enough to get by in a playoff series, though, and not get hunted? Like I said, I'm not saying he's the perfect backup point guard, but I am saying I feel like that should be the number one priority. And if you're saying KPJ is that guy that can fill that role, I just don't see it right now. He's too much of an up and down player. And in a 7-game series, I don't know if he's going to make enough high IQ basketball plays to not get benched in that series. Rock said, also curious, what are you thinking the Jazz are taking back for Sexton? Is Man in a combo of Man, PJ, Bones, 2 of the 3? Is that what it would be? I think they'd probably have to give up Terrence Mann. Now, Colin Sexton does have a year left after this one. So he's making $18 million this year, $19 million next season. I don't think, as I always say, you got to look at it from both sides when it comes down to these trade requests. And the trade machine stuff doesn't typically account for that. It just doesn't ever account for that. It's just about if the money actually works, if it's feasible in that respect. But it's about whether or not the opposition likes what they're getting back. In this case, the Utah Jazz. And they don't have to trade him. And there's other teams out there that can offer probably a lot more. I would think it takes either Man or their first-round pick from the Clippers to get it done. And if you're giving up the first-round pick, yeah, that's a lot. Like, that, to me, is a real problem. I value Terrence Mann. Don't get me wrong. He's one of my favorite Clippers. I don't want to see him go. I just see the minutes crunch that is coming when they're healthy that could already have Terrence Mann, playing infrequently. because if they're fully healthy and Kawhi's back and you got Amir Coffey, DJ, Chris Dunn, if KPJ is still playing, where are Terrence Mann's minutes coming from? How is he getting minutes out there? So it's not necessarily a reflection of Terrence Mann and what I think of him as a player, but he got off to another slow start this season. Then he was starting to get it together, then got hurt. And now if Kawhi comes back, that changes rotations, lineups, and how minutes are dispersed. And I just don't know if he's going to have a big enough role to make a big enough impact on this team. So do you look for a player and a type of player you don't have? Because I don't think they have a player like Colin Sexton. I don't think they have a more seasoned, reliable backup point guard that you need in a 7-game series. And while Terrence Mann can play some point, is he good enough to fill that role? That's what I'm wondering. Or do you need to look outside of this Clippers roster and make a move? And therefore, it could mean Terrence Mann is the trade piece or the big asset you give up to find that backup ball handler. Maddox said, we'll go 2-1 this road trip. Like the confidence. Rock said, Sexton does try. I'll give him that. You can always see the effort. I think that goes a long way on the defensive end. MKXLNT said, coffee and clips. What up, nation? What up, MK? Appreciate you. Jay said, who I was hanging with a little bit last night post-game afterwards, said, trade KPJ, not Mann. A true Clippers fan knows what he brings to this team. Mann has earned a second chance. The Utah series, the defense on Luka. Like, we really would keep KPJ over Mann. What? Well, of course, if they could trade KPJ instead of Mann, you'd rather hold on to Terrence Mann. But KPJ is only making like $3 million this season, and other teams are going to want Mann over KPJ. You have to give to get. Sucker Free Joe said KPJ was brought in by Ballmer. He's going to be in the rotation. Yes, he and Steve Ballmer's son, I guess, played together at some level. Gregory Elwood said, we actually need Mann's ball handling, to be honest, just to beat pressure. Seriously. I mean, they certainly could have used him last night. Rock said, that's not how it works. If you don't trade Mann for a guard or wing, he's just sitting around getting DNPs. Responding to Jose. Fitzgerald Hunt said, feel the Clippers should get Malcolm Brogdon. I like Malcolm Brogdon. I do. I might like him more than Colin Sexton. It's just the injury history. That's the only issue. David R. said it would be wise to see what the team has with Kawhi and Mann instead of making a trade when the team is already playing well. Mann should be getting KPJ's minutes. You know how I feel about it. When Kawhi comes back, I feel like the backup ball handlers should be Terrence Mann and Chris Dunn. And see if that's enough to get by with initiating offense. I just see that game last night as another warning sign that Chris Dunn bringing the ball up into the front court is extremely inconsistent and can be problematic. He had multiple turnovers again where he just made some really inexcusable passes that were immediately intercepted and taken the other way. Trace Jackson-Davis had a dunk doing that to him. We already saw that in that game in Minnesota with Anthony Edwards just picking his pocket, where Chris Dunn has to be much more careful with some of those passes into the front court. Eric said, Zoo has Shaq-like dominance and got those pivot moves now. He's had them. Didn't imagine praising Zoo these last 2 seasons. Used to hate Butterfingers. Maybe he just didn't get these reps before. A lot of it is opportunity, and the whole Butterfingers thing is so ridiculously unfair. And I find it basketball offensive. Ivica Zubac came into the Clippers and he had multiple broken fingers and he played with that through that. And so he was dropping passes. And that was the first impression of Ivica Zubac for a lot of Clippers fans. So it is stuck with him. And it's easily debunked by the fact that look at his turnover numbers per game. If he dropped as many passes as everybody says, he'd have far more turnovers. It's never been true. It's never been accurate. And it's a really annoying false narrative to me. I got to be honest. It's like a pet peeve. Rock said, to all Clippers fans, how many guys do you think will actually play in a playoff rotation? This is a good question. Rock said, Man, Dunn, Batum, Bamba lineup. Maybe with Norman there or with James in there. Mo Bamba has been struggling the last 2 weeks. I have not liked the lack of motor I've been seeing from him. Kaylee said, I think KD will be better bringing up the ball once he gets more rest when Y is back. All that defense is exhausting. Yeah, that's not a bad point. Those could be mental errors or mental fatigue. Just some of those lackadaisical passes. There could be, an energy sapped issue going on because of how much effort he gives on the defensive end that is hurting his offense and just the initiation of getting into the front court. Jay said 8 to 9, Man, Batum, Dunn, and Coffee off the bench. Rock says what I'm talking about. If by some chance this team is healthy, how is Man playing? Like, he hasn't had a better season than Amir Coffey, Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr. Coach Lou might favor KPJ being out there over Man because of his on-ball creation, being able to go out and get a bucket, do-it-yourself buckets, DIY buckets, and pass, get others going, which he needs to do a better job of, but you could see there's a lot of talent with the rock in his hands. It's up and down. High variance player. Rock said the lineup I listed was for the regular season. Gotcha. So your depth lineup is 4 non-shot creators with limited shooting besides Coffee. They don't have enough shot creators on this team. That's why when I talk about Colin Sexton and somebody playing with pace and up-tempo and downhill attack, I think he offers a different dimension to this team they don't have. But I also don't think it's a perfect pickup because he's undersized. So how do you want to play that? Jay said defense and rebounds wins championships. Offense does too. You have to be good on the offensive end. You're not winning without more shot making. And the Clippers, there hasn't been a team, I think, that was worse than a team that was a bottom 15 offense win a championship since the Detroit Pistons. And I don't even think they were bottom 15. You have to be good. Defensive rebounds wins championships is an old cliche for a reason, but you have to be better than the Clippers are offensive rating wise. History tells you that. Mike Dang said Harden was making some of those lazy passes too in the fourth. Got to not lose focus when up. Oh, I completely agree. James Harden had some awful passes in the fourth quarter. Clippers had 12 turnovers last night. I mean, that was a sham mockery. That was as bad and unserious of basketball as I had seen in a long time. Coach Lou's postgame basically said he's going to turn the page. He said 3 days from now, I'm not going to remember how we won. It's just going to be a W. But I got to think, because he did mention how they had worked on some of that stuff, and they did not pass the test last night. They completely failed against that ball pressure from the Golden State Warriors. Rock said for the playoffs, you go down to 8 or 9 at best. So Dunn is 6. You need shooting. So Coffee is 7. You sign Nico for utility 8. Yeah, when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, nuts and bolts of it, in a playoff series, yeah, you're playing 8 or 9 guys. Tough decisions have to be made. Is Terrence Mann going to get run? He doesn't set himself apart from guys that already do what he does and have done it better so far this season. When they brought in Chris Dunn, when they brought in Derrick Jones Jr., I said to myself, Terrence Mann better step up this year, or else he's going to be losing minutes, may lose his job, may get moved, because they have guys now that can do what he does and do it better, quite frankly. Now, Terrence Mann has stepped up in the playoffs in the past, and that should go a long way, because when teams are giving maximum effort out there, when it's a playoff series and you're seeing the same team over and over again, that stuff needs to matter. That has to be heavily weighed in to whether or not Terrence Mann and the slow start to this season is that meaningful. It's like, well, we've seen it before. Then he steps up in the playoffs. So how much you want to put into the slow start versus how much you want to put into how he has been in a playoff series where he's coming off one where he held down Luka Doncic to 38% shooting when he was matched up against him. That does need to be taken into account. Absence said Kawhi, Norm, Harden, and Zoo provide enough scoring. Everyone just needs to play defense and hit threes. And Terrence hasn't been hitting threes. He was playing better before he got hurt. But, he turns down those shots sometimes. Kaylee said Mann's big difficulty has been his unwillingness and hesitation to go on offense. There you go. I think unless he gets over it and just starts shooting confidently, KPJ will be over him in the rotation. MKXLNT said those sick 3-point blocks from Harden and La Bamba, though. Clippers did have some great blocks last night. Rock said, I'm so worried about his legs and wear and tear. We're not at the halfway point yet. I think talking about James Harden, obviously. Drive by Buddy said, our offense is going to be hard to keep up with when Kawhi plays. We just got to keep the ball in rotation. They're not going to know who to double. As long as they continue to keep Big Zoo involved, you have to make 4 guys a threat in the starting lineup. Obviously, James Harden and Kawhi, but then Norm and then Big Zoo. He has to be a threat. He has to get consistent touches so teams respect him, so you can create havoc and teams aren't able to double as often. Link said, have you seen the photo of Kawhi and his knee? People saying it looks bad, but I thought it looked totally normal. Guys, the one they're pointing to, I just responded to it earlier on one of the accounts that is one of the most out-of-pocket, deranged accounts out there. That picture is of his left knee. His left knee is not the one that has had surgery. It's just a photo they're making something out of because his quad looks to be flexed. And people are trying to say, oh, his knee is cooked. That's his left knee, not his right knee. His right knee. His right leg had the tendinopathy, the ACL tear, the meniscus, the swelling. Let's debunk that right now. That photo is trash. And anyone bringing that up like they got some evidence on Kawhi is completely clueless. They're pointing to his left knee, which is not the one that has been problematic. Jay said, look, I still have PTSD from trading SGA. Not comparing SGA to Mann, but do not want to see Mann cooking for another team. Mann is closer to a finished product, my guy. I don't know what you're talking about. Mann is 28. He's older than SGA. Gotten a pretty big sample size of who Terrence Mann is at this point. You can chill with that. That's not a real comparison. Kaylee said, also just wants to say Nico has been so good. Such a great player that deserves more praise. Guys, Nico last night, with that hustle play he made on the floor in the first half, saving the basketball and getting it to Chris Dunn for the layup, where he's on the floor in the backcourt going for that steal. That was just an unreal play by Nico Batum. Can't say enough about Nico. One of my favorite Clippers ever, the steal on Waters. That was such a high-level basketball play and a great effort play. And he also had a big three after a Warriors timeout in the third quarter. And the end of the third quarter, the offensive rebound he had after a hard missed three where he tapped it out to Norm, who then hit a three to put him up by 19. They needed all 19 of those points they were up by heading into the fourth quarter to come through with the victory. Nico Batum, the underrated plays that he makes for this team, you can't ever overlook the impact of Nico. Eric said James Harden thought the game was a wrap going into the fourth quarter yesterday. Saw him on TV chilling with Kawhi on the bench, not watching plays. When he was called back, he was cold and careless, wasn't prepared to play the fourth quarter. Felt like the entire team was like that. They weren't locked in. They weren't focused. They didn't have the necessary competitive spirit when they came back in the fourth. What's interesting, though, is he talked with Kawhi Leonard post-game. He said he and Kawhi were talking about how Kawhi doesn't want to disrupt the flow when he comes back. He doesn't want to come back and, soak up all the offensive possessions. Have unnecessarily when they're playing right now. He wants to fit in is doing them having to adjust. They were already happy. So that is very happy with how this team has been without Kawhi so far. In a nutshell, we always say it matters what you do in the playoffs. Man has proven himself in playoff series. Anyways, yet a clip or Rock said exactly. That's why stuff. I'll continue to mention he didn't fully have Kyron's man. They have other guys that do his role. I've been saying that. They have players. Again, they haven't proven what man has in a playoff series, though. That does matter. Like, you have to put more weight into what he has done in the playoffs than what his issues have been with slow starts in the regular season. I care more about finishing strong than starting slow and finishing strong in the most high leverage situations. Internet's being hurt right now. How am I sounding, guys? Let me know. I am parked near a park in Burbank. Am I sounding okay? Rock mentioned the Burbank internet. I'm just running this off my hotspot on my phone. Let me know if you guys can hear me all right. Kaylee said Kawhi has experience playing as part of a system with the Spurs. He knows team ball. It's odd hearing him fear that he disrupts the chemistry. I mean, sure, Kawhi in 2025 isn't Spurs Kawhi, but still. I think it's just Kawhi re-emphasizing something that everybody knows he's not a selfish player, but he is cognizant of making sure that he's not going to hurt what they have going right now. And I think that's really important from your leader, from your best player. That's one of the reasons I've always loved Kawhi, and he's a different type of superstar. First of all, he plays both ways. Second of all, he's extremely unselfish. The different Woods design. I think things are clearing up here. I'm not sure Either way, I enjoyed the discussion with you guys. Rock, appreciate you. Amin, who else has been here? Jay, Southgate, Buddy. And you know what? Because you guys are in here, here's what we're going to do for the Kawhi Leonard bobblehead. We're going to give that away right now. Here's what I want you to do. The third keyword for the Kawhi Leonard bobblehead. I'm going to give it away right now. It is ghost. The third keyword for the Kawhi Leonard bobblehead is ghost. You have all three keywords in the comment section of this episode. You win the Kawhi Leonard Christmas-themed bobblehead. I'll send it to you. Appreciate you all. Man, I love Clipper Nation being a part of this. We will talk to you later tonight on Clips and Dip. And of course, Clippers Talk is 7 days a week. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm Adam Osland. You've been listening to another edition of Clippers Talk Live. Talk to you tomorrow.